Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1396. Where are we going to stay now? Both of our rooms were in that wing. Rue realized as Kara landed next to Carl and her older brother. That's what you're worried about? Prince Lucas laughed as he saw her pouting expression. It's not the only thing, but it's on the list. I'm more worried about the maids, but I'm trying not to think about that. Rue replied stiffly. Sorry, that was indelicate of me. Let's get you relocated to the royal wing. I am certain that the king would not object to having you with the rest of the family, and he can make an exception to allow the envoy and Miss Kara to join you. The crown prince decided. Just as he finished speaking, he felt someone staring at his back, and turned to see the king striding in their direction, unbothered by the unsure footing provided by the rubble. Situation report. He demanded. 3 rescued, 1 more underway, 2 staff members and 3 palace guards currently unaccounted for. The library has been confirmed to be intact, though the barriers and stone took significant damage. The lower levels are undamaged. The blast appears to have been focused outward on this level, which collapsed the upper levels onto it. Lucas summarized. Find the rest of our people. Is there any indication of what sort of attack we suffered? The king asked. The crown prince was about to say no, but turned to the ladies for assistance. Kara shrugged. It contained anti-magic elements to collapse the illusionary domain. Then a high-powered explosive that took out multiple rooms directly and managed to destroy my barrier from the other end of the hallway. The floor collapsed under us when the roof caved in, which dropped us into an intact room. The king nodded. I believe that it might be wise to relocate you entirely out of the palace. There is a secure location in the mountains that we use as a family retreat. With a proper guard placed, it should be safe for you to remain there while the investigation is ongoing. Lucas, that will include your family as well. Until the target is determined, and the motive, it is not safe to leave you all in the royal wing. That alone was enough to tell them that the king had a strong suspicion who was behind this attack. If he didn't suspect that it was someone from the royal family, then leaving them in the royal wing would be much safer, as there was an entire guard force dedicated to keeping the family safe. Prince Lucas nodded. All right, I can understand that position. I will gather my hatchling and take Rue and the envoy with me to the mountain retreat. The king sighed. I may have to replace the guard at the retreat. Inform me if you sense anything off about them, or simply don't feel safe. Carl cleared his throat. Your Majesty, if I may, I can summon a set of personal guards who should be sufficient for the purpose of maintaining security around the princess. As long as the crown prince has a guard retinue that he trusts implicitly, we should be fine with the existing staff at the retreat. I would advise that someone from your intelligence agency be sent to keep an eye on anyone trying to send messages to or from the location, though. I know that they are system linked and we can't monitor those messages, but small items are often passed off as physical messages. Small items like poison, Carl meant. But the messengers themselves were often used to ferry items within their inventory. He should know he kept a massive stock of items on him at all times. The king nodded. That is a valid concern. I can order that nobody enters or leaves the area until the situation is resolved. However, it could be some time and food deliveries would be necessary, as well as any shopping that needs to be done in the town. Carl smiled. I can offer to do that. Shopping isn't beneath my dignity, and I can assure you that I will do my best to protect those in my care. The king nodded. Fine, I won't object. Lucas, lead them away. I will have guards accompany you until you are outside of the palace. After that, you will be traveling alone with your assigned guards, so that word of your destination does not reach outsiders. I will keep in touch as we investigate, but I don't expect the resolution to be fast or easy. The tone of the king's voice changed at the end, and Carl saw that an understanding was being reached between father and son. They both had a very good idea who was behind this, but they had to be 100% sure that it wasn't a situation where someone was being used as a scapegoat, while the real perpetrators managed to get away for lack of solid evidence. At the upper levels of the royal family, only the strongest of proof would do, and that was not going to be easy for the king to obtain, unless someone turned on their employer. While that could and did happen, the odds of the person being a member of someone's personal guard were extremely low. They were chosen for loyalty, and often bound with spells that would alert their employer if they even seriously considered betrayal. But more than that, if they were system-linked as guards or guild members, they would be flagged for attacking their own if they did betray. And no guild would accept someone with that flag. In fact, many would attack on sight, assuming them to be a wanted criminal. The Darklight host had never suffered such an incident in Carl's time, but he had heard about it from many of the Alliance members, usually as slander of another guild. You had to do something pretty objectionable for a member to risk that, unless they were flat-out insane. Chapter 1397 Exit Stage Left. Before anyone in the palace could figure out what had happened, Crown Prince Lucas and Carl were already leading a small procession out of the palace. They were accompanied by a dozen guards, 4 maids from the Crown Prince's suite, and 1 grizzled carriage driver, who looked more than a little annoyed to be sent away from the palace just when things were starting to get interesting. But he wasn't told the whole story, only that the Crown Prince's hatchling needed a calm environment for her early development, and that would not be available in the palace during renovations. He didn't know that they were the target of the attack or even that it was an attack at all, and not a tragic accident during training. Everyone knew that there was a new training area in that wing, but none of them knew yet that the training area was intact and functional, not the source of the problem. Why didn't we just fly? It would have been so much faster. Kara asked once they were out of the capital. Because we have a hatchling with us. They don't do well with cold temperatures and high altitudes during their first few months. Lucas informed her. Really? I didn't know that. We could keep her warm, and Carl is big enough to carry the carriage in his claws. Kara suggested. The thought of a world dragon carrying a carriage for a hatchling minor princess was enough to put a smile on the driver's face. I don't think that the raptors would handle that well. They're not big fans of flying. He joked with a gesture to the reptilian carriage beasts. Good point. Well, at the very least we can have Carl buff them up so this isn't so slow. Kara decided. Are you in a hurry? The driver asked, wondering why the strange girl was so impatient. No, she's just easily bored, and traveling at a walking pace frustrates her at all times. Carl joked. Ah, to be young again. Well, you can always fly along with the carriage if you would like. But you'll be doing a lot of circling. The driver suggested. Kara shook her head. No, a chaos badger is pretty recognizable, and the whole point is to go on vacation and not be bothered for a little while. If everyone sees where we're going, they'll just come bother us in a new spot. I see. Well, I can assure you that nobody cares where I'm going, so if you can wait long enough, we can get to your destination without a single problem. The driver agreed. We can play games. I have cards. Rue suggested. Kara smiled at the princess. Why didn't you say that earlier? I have a rather extensive knowledge of popular card games. Now, what are we going to play first? I am thinking baccarat, or perhaps poker. Rue frowned. I don't know those ones. What about Go Fish? Do you know that one? The Crown Prince was doing his very best not to laugh at the Chaos Badger, who was more likely to be a card shark than a casual children's game type of person. But Kara brought out a small folding table and set it between her and Rue. Go Fish it is. Who else wants in on this action? Mildred shifted to sit in on the game, while Carl moved to give them space. I will keep watch in case we are followed. I don't sense anything, but if we are, I can send something to deal with it without breaking our cover. He whispered to Lucas. The Crown Prince got a dangerous look in his eyes as he smiled. If you're certain that nobody will trace it back to you, go ahead. Other than the Supreme Lady, I doubt that anyone on this continent even knows that I have the skill. But if we don't use it, I will call them once we arrive at our destination, and I can have the summoned creatures work as guards. They don't need to sleep, and it makes for a great advantage when you are camped and in need of rest. The carriage was making good time down the roads, as the raptors were much faster than horses were. But with 100 kilometers to go, it was going to take them all day to get there, instead of a few hours at the very most while flying. In fact, if Carl had flown them all directly, they would have been at the retreat faster than it had taken them to get out of the city. It would not have been subtle, though. With the size of his dragon form, especially when enhanced to carry passengers, he would create a spectacle that nobody who saw him would soon forget. The girls' card game managed to pass a few hours before they got bored, and then an afternoon nap with Kara, Rue, and Lucas hatchling all piled up on the floor took another few hours. That got them into the mountains, and the retreat was finally in sight. It was no mere villa. No, this was a full-fledged mountain castle for the royal family. It wasn't large, but Carl was certain that it could hold 50 guests with ease, and it had its own guard detachment. That was not optimal from a security standpoint. None of them knew who the guards might be loyal to, or their political affiliation in the never-ending drama that was the life of the royals. But they should be loyal to the king, and with the Crown Prince present, Carl had some hope that they wouldn't cause any issues, even if they were from families that were loyal to the Queen's faction. Alright, this looks like a good spot to teach a hatchling to fly. Not too high, but thin enough air to give those wing muscles a workout. We will add the little one's physical conditioning to the mix, since she's born a commander. Carl decided as they wound their way up the gravel road. That's not necessary, Envoy. We will get to her training soon. Matilda whispered, while protectively cuddling her little one. Nonsense. Everyone loves to fly. Plus, it will do her a lot of good to start early in thin air, so she will have an advantage over the others her age when we finally get back to the capital. Plus, it would keep Kara from getting bored. Keeping Kara from getting bored was always a priority, and while they were up here in the mountains, there wouldn't be much else for her to do outside of training Rue. So, having the hatchling to play with would satisfy her need to cause chaos, as well as serving a productive purpose. Chapter 1398 Mountain Retreat. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, has arrived. The driver declared as they reached the gates. The guards blocking the way saluted as they saw the royal emblem that the driver had been given, and then opened the gates for them to enter. The arrival of a carriage had put the whole staff into a frenzy, with last-minute cleaning and room preparation underway the moment that they had been spotted coming up the hill. That was one of the other reasons that it was preferred for them to travel by carriage. It gave the staff time to prepare for their arrival when they weren't informed in advance. A wing of dragons descending from the sky might be significantly faster, but with only a few minutes to prepare, it was impossible to have the entire castle up to standards before the guests arrived. Though Carl likely wouldn't have noticed if they didn't do anything but change the bedding. His version of clean and the royal version of clean were far from being the same thing. He was used to the whirlwind that was the guild house, where there were crafting materials and half-finished projects everywhere, or random people standing around to be used as mannequins for race fashion designs. The carriage stopped at the gates, and a group of maids came out to greet them, and get an update on the royal family members' preferences from the maids that they had brought along with them. You should call out your summoned guards now, so that the staff isn't surprised to find them. If they mistake them for intruders, it could cause a much larger incident. Lucas suggested when they exited the carriage. Good idea. Alright, I will bring out the basic security team for now. Carl agreed. Monkeys? No, bring out the elves. Nyx will love them. Yeah, elf kings and snake girls. Kara insisted. Carl smiled as he called out the Haint, his epic guard, who also looked like a form of Treyant, for Lamia bodyguards, and a pair of dark elven kings. These should do as a basic security force. I would call golems and epic golems as well, but they are larger and not as well suited to being indoors. These few should be more than enough to secure our safety. Carl informed the Crown Prince and by extension the staff. What sort of summoning ability is that? I am familiar with golems of multiple sorts, but none of these look like golems. Definitely not those two dark elves. The look they are giving the maids is concerning. Lucas noted. They won't harm them. They're quite good about keeping to their duties. But they are dark elven kings. Epic golems cloned from a dungeon boss. They are intelligent, capable of independent thought, and they can create their own strategies. It makes fighting a lot easier. The Lamia are a bodyguard spell and also intelligent, as is the epic guard. The final one is actually a Haint, a living weapon grown from the claw of another of her kind. She's the strong silent type, but she's wickedly fast, and her skills are incredible to see in action. Lucas nodded slowly as Rue ran over to greet the Lamia. That's an awesome spell. I like that they're not all big strong guys. Having cute girls as bodyguards is way better than having some smelly old dragon elder. The princess insisted. The Crown Prince's guard chuckled quietly at her comment. Most of them were considered elders by Rue's definition, and they were all dragons. But it generally took a few centuries for a common dragon to reach the mythic rank, so there were no young people on the guard detachments for senior royals. As long as they are capable, I don't mind if you want them as your personal guards for this trip. The ladies are quite friendly, and I am told that Lamia give the best hugs. Carl informed the princess with a smile. Lucas' hatchling turned so fast she almost fell out of her mother's arms, then began flapping desperately to get over to them. You couldn't just tell it that there was a better source of hugs available and then not prove it. Mildred sighed and let the little one fly over to the bodyguard, who cradled the little dragon in all four of her arms, with a smile. The little one sighed happily. The Carl was right. For arms for hugs was superior to any other hug. But on closer examination, she realized she was still too small for a proper Lamia hug, as they had a whole lot of tail that could wrap around for bonus hug. That was a shame. She couldn't wait to grow up and find out for sure how good it could be. However, staying awake was exhausting, and within minutes, she was asleep again, securely cradled in the bodyguard's arms. You know, they actually make pretty good nannies. The extra arms let them hold wiggling babies securely, and when she's not fussing, they can use the extra arms to take care of tasks, or even defend against attacks. Mildred realized. Exactly. They're wonderful at their job. Don't worry too much about the little one. They will watch out for her when you're busy. Now, should we let the staff here do their jobs and lead us to a suite? I'm sure that they're dying to prove that they managed to complete their tasks before we arrived. Carl teased the flustered new mother. The staff eagerly motioned for them to follow, and led the groups to royal suites in the castle, each with far more space than even Carl thought that they might need. The rooms were designed with dragons in mind, so the main rooms were 5 meters tall, large enough for all but the biggest of dragons to walk in from the central courtyard before transforming. But there were also signs that said there were dens dug into the mountain, for dragons who wanted to relax or meditate in their scaled forms, a state that was nearly impossible to maintain within the capital. There simply wasn't enough space for everyone to be in dragon form in a big city. Sir, this is your suite. If you need anything else, please let us know. The maid informed Carl as she stopped in front of a massive room. All I will regularly need is access to the princess for training purposes. I am her tutor, and we're working on both magical and physical skill development. I will also set up a temporary training area here, but that won't require your assistance, other than for food and beverages during the training sessions. Kara nodded eagerly. She was ready to start training again. The bunny maids were great fun to play with, fast and smart. Of course, she wasn't trying to beat them up. It was more fun to try to capture and tickle them because they fought so much harder than they did to simply avoid injury. Back in the capital, the palace was in a state of utter panic. The attack had failed to kill 2 of the 3 maids who were in the illusionary domain. As Carl had suspected, when the illusion was broken they were deposited multiple rooms away, and then trapped by the falling stone. But now they had been rescued, and they were quite emphatic about the fact that an unknown person had entered with a tray of supplies, and that had been the source of the explosion. That person was wearing palace servant livery, but neither of them had recognized him, and the man left before they had a chance to finish their tasks and speak to him. Unfortunately, the 3rd maid had entered right then, and that had triggered the explosion. So it was clear to the king, and to everyone else within the inner circle, that it was a deliberate attack, and that someone among the 3 noble ladies was the target. Of all the bad ideas that lesser royals had come up with during succession battles, this one had to be the very worst in the opinion of the ministers. But the more information they got, especially about how a mythic-ranked illusionary domain had been dispelled by the nullification effect before the blast, the more they began to realize that this was no mere sibling squabble taken to extremes. But if it wasn't, then it was something much worse. Chapter 1399, Keep the Theme. What are we going to train first? Rue asked as Carl began setting up a new training area within an illusionary domain in the suite next to his own. The castle staff were as enthralled as the palace staff had been by the new facility, and just as horrified by the thought of having to clean it when the training was finished. The basic setup was the same, but this time it was themed to match the mountains that they were located in. It was also larger than either of the ones that came before it, with a larger flight obstacle course and more training scenarios. In addition to spell targeting, Carl had added combat strategy to lead troops, a financial planning course, and a large open-air office area for Prince Lucas to continue her training. Just because they were considered to be in hiding didn't mean that she could slack off on her new duties, and the Crown Prince had every intention of ensuring that she was the best trained assistant that anyone had ever seen by the time that they returned. But Carl had more plans than that. I will let Kara lead you through the training today, while I work on some new material for you. I suspect that there is a way for me to either get you some skill points, or to teach you some new spells and skills that will help your growth. You're doing very well, but we need to shock the world with your progress when we get back to the palace. He informed Rue when she arrived for her training. Got it, boss. Don't worry. Kara knows how to do all the things. Carl smiled at the princess. Knowing how to do the things was not the problem with letting Kara lead the training. The problem was that Kara knew too many things. And she was terrible about keeping them to herself instead of teaching them to children much too young to be learning such things. Kara mentally laughed at Carl's thoughts. She was younger than Rue was, so what was the harm in teaching the little princess a few more interesting things? She happily led Rue into the training area, while Carl sat down in the suite to begin working on a way to transform Rue into a proper shadow dragon for legitimacy without changing her entire bloodline using evolution. That would be the easiest way, but the princess had insisted that she didn't want her bloodline to be changed. She was capable of attaining a void dragon form if he applied the right skills, but the royal family were not void dragons. Life would have been so much easier if the first skill he made would have turned her into an epic grade shadow dragon. It would have given her all the status that she needed in the royal court, as there was no real way to differentiate between a skill that transformed her into the draconic side of her lineage and an actual evolution. At least, there was no easy way, and certainly not one that the public would have access to, when it came to testing a royal family member's claims. As he settled into work, Prince Lucas came to join him, sitting on the sofa across from Carl. What is it that you're planning for Rue? Do you have a hidden skill that she can learn, like how you taught her one that awakened her class? He asked. Carl nodded. I do. But I'm trying to find a way to get her to shift into a shadow dragon, so that she will feel more legitimate to the royal family. I could forcefully evolve her, but she didn't want that. So, I'm trying to find a way to do it with a skill, since the first one I came up with turned her into a void dragon, following her class, not her bloodline. Lucas sighed. I can talk to her later. There is a lot of prejudice against half-dragons or dragonkin in the royal family. But Rue deserves better than that. Carl shrugged. It might also make the attacks worse if she was suddenly a dragon who could properly transform on her own. Even if I taught her the transformation that we used earlier and allowed her to be an epic void dragon, it would alarm many of the nobles in the palace. You're not wrong about that. It might calm some of them down, but the ones who want to keep her as far from power as possible would only be encouraged to take more drastic measures. The part one don't get is why they're so threatened by her. It's not logical. The queen cursed her, and she hadn't awakened at all. So, she shouldn't have been a threat, but they still targeted her. Then you showed up to help her awaken, and the queen's faction doubled down on trying to find ways to suppress her influence at court with rumors of forbidden arts. Then, when that didn't work, they suggested that she should be married off and out of the country entirely. That would make her no threat at all, as once she enters another royal family or even a foreign noble family, she would lose her right to succession. But still, someone bombed your room. I refuse to believe that the target was Mildred. It might have been Kara, but she's been surprisingly well-behaved for a badger, and the children love her. Their parents might not, but not to the point of attacking two royals to get at her. Carl laughed at the man's sour expression. She has that effect on people, especially when she starts to entertain their children. But you're right. There is something that we are missing. Could it be a prophecy? Something that a seer foretold and the recipient kept secret? That was almost certain to be the case, given that Misty had sent him through time to change destiny. But Prince Lucas wouldn't know that. That could be the case. It would explain why the queen went as far as to curse her the year that she was born. I know that there was a level of enmity between her and Rue's mother. However, the elf is dead, and there was no reason to continue the vendetta. That nearly got her dethroned, by the way. It seems that every time the queen interacts with Rue, it ends badly for her, and her schemes are simply too transparent when it comes to the princess. Now, is there anything that I can do to help you with your work? Lucas asked. Carl shook his head. All the knowledge is in my mind. It's just a matter of skill that will determine if I am actually capable of doing what I want. Advancing her is simple enough. Teaching her skills that I know is also relatively easy. But trying to convince a transformation spell that she should be a specific sort of dragon is not going to be nearly as easy. Perhaps I will try the basic beast form spell with a few tweaks. That might guarantee a dragon form, and hopefully a shadow dragon this time. The crown prince frowned. Well, that is definitely not a skill that I possess. We'll leave you to it, but I will go speak with the princess, to see if she's open to having you assist her in an evolution that will enhance her draconic side. Chapter 1400 Greater Beast Form. Carl started his plan for the day with a combination of evolution and beast form. The idea was that it should trigger beast form to give an appearance that would mimic their natural bloodline, in a form the same or higher than the bloodline that they currently possessed, while favoring the beast. For Rue, that would be a shadow dragon. If it worked, it would be perfect, and both of the skills were common enough that it wouldn't be horrifically restrictive to cast. The combination created greater beast form, but as he finished it, Carl realized that he might just be able to use unholy beast transformation on Rue. Shadow dragons seemed like the sort of unholy magic attuned sort of creatures it would like. So, Carl made plans to try both on her to see which one worked. But he couldn't in good conscience try out new spells on the princess without knowing what they would do. He obviously had to try them on himself first. First, Carl double-checked that there was nobody else in the suite with him, then blocked all the entrances and windows with an opaque barrier. Now he could try Greater Beast Form. The spell shimmered over his body, and Carl found himself back in a familiar furry state, as a cat demon. Only, this time, his claws radiated power, and his body seemed to pulse with mana, moving it through his lungs with every breath. It was an incredibly efficient meditation form, and the amount of mana that he could use at one time would be even more impressive than it was before. Totally worth the effort to combine the skills. He wasn't sure how effective it would be on Rue, as he didn't know what beast form turned her into. But there was a chance it would work, so he would try it as soon as they were finished training for the day. Fortunately, that would be soon, as Carl realized the sun was already setting, and he had lost most of a day while intensely focused on altering the spell. It was entirely too easy to lose track of time when working with certain skills, he noticed. Runecrafting was the same as spell merger, in that he could get started and then just finish his workdays later without noticing the difference. It must be how immortals and the ancient dragons felt. Carl quickly changed back to Tengu form so that he didn't confuse the others when they returned, then lowered the barriers so that he could go check on the state of Rue's training. Kara was still next door in the illusion, so there shouldn't be any issues. But as he should have expected, there were far more than 3 people in the room when he arrived. Kara and Rue had recruited all the children of the staff here to join in on the training as a group effort, and they had turned the day into an impromptu party. Carl, welcome back to the land of the living. The kids are just about done with their spell practice, and then we were going to head down for dinner. It will be in the formal dining room, which is just down the hall and on the main floor. Prince Lucas greeted him. That works for me. I think that I have a spell ready for Rue to try, but it can wait until after dinner, in case it needs some tweaking. I know what a hangry dragon is like. The staff giggled at Carl's assessment, and then checked the trays of snacks that they had brought to the training room for just that reason. Dinner at the castle was a very different experience to dinner at the palace, as it was just the 6 of them at the table, 7 if you counted the nanny who was helping feed a fussy hatchling. Kara had encouraged her to fly around the training area all day, and while she had been worn out to the point of needing a 3rd nap for the day, she had no intentions of stopping to eat now that she had found a spot she could fly. No young dragon could resist such temptation. Once the maid gave up on trying to make her eat any more, the little one came to land on Carl's shoulder with her tail wrapped around his neck for balance. The large feathered wings of a tengu made it easy to balance her weight, and gave her a perch for her back legs, as well as a much better viewpoint than her chair. Carl absently stroked her head as he finished his meal, then rose and gestured for Rue to join him. Let's get to the last trial of the day. I want to try 2 different transformation spells on you tonight, with the hope that one of them will make you a shadow dragon. If that works, I will teach you the skill, and then you can use it to improve your status within the royal family. Being half-dragon might make them look down on you now, but if you can transform, then they will start to see you differently. I know that the bias is unfair, but such is life, and if you want to fulfill that goal you stated, it's necessary to play along with their rules for a while. Rue smiled as Carl tried to ease her into the idea of being a dragon. Her eldest half-brother had already given her the speech, and he had been quite convincing with his explanation of how and why it was important for her to be seen as equal to the other princes and princesses. Even if Carl had to evolve her into something more dragon than she was now, she would accept it for the sake of revenge. She followed him back to the training room, and Carl motioned for her to stand in the open. All right, first up, I will try greater beast form on you, and hope that it turns you into a shadow dragon. If it does, we're good to go. If it doesn't, then I have another option that may or may not work. Before she could answer, Carl cast the spell, and Rue found herself expanding. Her dragon form wasn't large, but it was a dragon. Her keen eyes spotted Carl nodding in satisfaction. Then a system message appeared in her vision. Champion Carl offers knowledge. Greater beast form will be transferred to the vengeful Princess Ruck. Accept? Y/N. Rue cheered as she accepted the spell, and laughed as Lucas picked her up under the wings to spin her in happy circles. Good work, Rue. You're a true shadow dragon now. At least in appearance. Rue nodded in agreement. And I will show them that I'm worthy of being one by birthright as well. What do I look like? Am I cute as a dragon? Do I look mighty? Imposing? Prince Lucas laughed, calling her dragon form anything other than adorable, with the hint of baby fat left in her cheeks, would just be wrong. Adorable for sure. You'll grow into a mighty and imposing dragon later. There is plenty of time for that. Chapter 1401 Convincing Fake. Mildred smiled as she saw Rue's new form. You know, with that appearance, nobody would ever know that you were not born a pure-blooded dragon. If anything, they'll think your pointy ears are a quirk of your transformation. I don't sense any sort of non-draconic lineage in you at all while you're transformed, she informed the young princess. Now, we just need to update your skills so that you can properly show off your potential, and you'll be fit to take over the world. Or at least your own hometown or something. Kara joked. Rue giggled at her. Well, if we work on that meditation thingy, it should help, right? All I have to do is make it to totem ranked before adulthood, and I'll be considered a prodigy. That sounds easy enough. I've already come this far so fast. Just a little bit more, and I'll be a totem-ranked juvenile, and everyone will have to fear my potential. Lucas sighed. I think that they already do. That's why we're here, remember? But if you can advance even one more time, you'll start getting attention from our father, who will start wanting to arrange a good marriage for you. All of our sisters have married into strong alliances, even the ones with mediocre potential. It's not a secret that the king has always been fond of you, so he will definitely try to find you something good. Rue nodded. That's probably inevitable. But if he sends me away, how am I supposed to finish my life goals? You have life goals already? I'm impressed. Mildred joked. Rue nodded. I want to be powerful enough to make everyone who bullied me when I was weak apologize. Not just the fake apologies that they do when they get caught breaking laws and want to get out of trouble, either. The consort smiled. I can understand that one. When we first got together, everyone was afraid that my Lucas was going to name me his wife, and that would make me the crown princess. That would have been a disaster for me, and for most of the ones who were still hoping to get the position. So, they were horrible to me for months. But after a while it became clear that my position was settled and that I didn't want the position of the main wife. I'm happy where I'm at, and I fully understand that the position of crown princess will go to a political wife, a marriage to make the kingdom stronger. That's surprisingly realistic of you, Carl noted. Mildred giggled. You just haven't realized how much an official wife can hate the consort that her husband actually cares about. 9 times out of 10 they hate each other, but only a madwoman would actually try to harm her and risk her position as queen. Oddly, that doesn't seem to apply to king candidates. If they marry into a ruling queen's family, they all tend to go power-hungry and forget that they're the live-in in-laws, not the real ruler. Kara winked at her. You need to keep them in their place or they get uppity. It's a guy thing. I wish we'd brought Sister Ray with us. She's a master of making people behave. Carl didn't miss that Mildred was clearly talking about the current queen, who had most likely killed Rue's mother. She might be politically strong, but from what he had learned so far, it was more like the grudging respect for a tyrant than loyalty to a leader. I think that we should work on having Rue build up friendships among other royals as well. Not just local ones, but some from neighboring countries. If people respect her as a leader, then, no matter where she ends up, she will have some solid backing when she arrives. He suggested. They were aiming to have her be the Queen of Gethuzan, but he wasn't going to say that outright. Prince Lucas nodded. That is a wonderful idea. If she has allies among the other nations' royals, she will be able to more easily advance. Now, you've taught her the basics of the methods needed already, and I'm sure that you have some more resources for her, but there is always something that a dragon will need to help them grow, and it's often in another country. For a royal to travel is a complicated issue. We might have better access to resources, but a lot of that relies upon our ability to convince another nation's leader to let us go get it. Like when I advanced to mythic rank. I needed a particular potion to help cleanse some lingering damage that regular healing wouldn't touch. So, I had to ask the hill dwarves to help me meet with the alchemist that could make it. That sort of connection is everything for a royal. Carl nodded, and Rue smiled as she began to understand. And, if the guests like me, then it's impossible to bully me in public. You're not wrong, but it's so much more than that. You'll understand once you start making the connections. The ability to move freely among other royals and know that they are allies makes social events so much easier. They're not part of the local power struggle, so you can talk to them and build political or business relationships, while ignoring the locals who are giving you headaches, Lucas explained. That sounds lovely. All right, Mr. Carl, do your best. I'll rely on you to help me make it through my advancements so that I can be that sort of royal, while big brother Lucas teaches me how to make friends with royalty. Rue laughed. Carl gave her a thumbs up, while Kara wrapped an arm around her and Stage whispered in her ear. Don't worry, we've got lots of tricks to help you advance. Now that we know you've got the potential, we can even push the first advancements so that you'll be ahead of the others. It might not be fun, but I am sure that we can do it. Chapter 1402 to play her part. Kara's insistence on helping Remy's goal of gathering data on all sorts of advancement methods turned the mountain castle into the site of chaos for the next week. Every waking moment was spent either building muscles in dragon form, so that Rue could more convincingly play the part of a royal shadow dragon, or meditating, while the princess was forcefully imbued with above-rank mana. The idea was that her body would adapt faster with the flood of power, and she was working on her power matrix, which would accelerate the process. By the end of the week, she had managed to turn a single point into 3, and Prince Lucas sensed that she was actually beginning to understand one of the fundamental rules. Her mana was changing ever so slightly, but enough that it would not be something that he expected of anyone under totem rank. Even Carl was impressed. If he had to guess, Rue's potential was far higher than even his own. She grasped the concepts more quickly, she learned the things that he had needed to advance much earlier, and her growth rate was phenomenal. 1 week was all that it had taken to go from the advancement to royal rank to nearly the bottleneck before Monarch. Remy was going to be overjoyed when she found out that this sort of intense advancement regimen had a chance of working. But on the other hand, their efforts to help Mildred and the hatchling were meeting with much less impressive results. They were still advancing much more quickly than usual, but compared to Princess Rue, they might as well be snails in a horse race. The princess really is a prodigy. Do you think that might be why the queen cursed her? I have been thinking about it, and it doesn't make sense otherwise. The queen's mother is a seer, so she had to have received a vision about the princess that would cause her to take the drastic actions that she has. But with this sort of talent, there is a good chance that Rue will be able to take over my position if the king waits too long to hand over power. Even a decade would be enough that Rue would be at the peak of mythic rank if nothing happens to stop her. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy for her. But that is going to bring a huge amount of danger her way, and Rue is far too kind to be able to take care of it on her own. If she had someone like Kara, who could quietly make problems go away for her, she might be alright. But that sort of person isn't easy to find. Lucas quietly informed Carl as the Badger and Princess worked through a mana stress test session. The two men watched the girls intensely training for a moment as Carl contemplated his answer. You know, there is another option. A prodigy like Rue, who is going to reach Overlord before I have to return home, and likely before she even starts puberty, needs a strong protector. If you declared her as your leading candidate for Crown Princess, you could watch over her, and then let her take the throne beside you when you ascend. It's a win-win, really. Rue isn't going to hurt Mildred. She's not going to be jealous of your firstborn like some outsider might be. Plus, she's clearly got the potential and the power to take the role. She just needs some time to grow into it. Carl explained quietly. Are you trying to match-make me with my own sister? How enlightened of you. Lucas joked. Carl shrugged. Your actual relationship is up to you. But I think that she would be a fierce queen for your reign. Lucas nodded. Rue was focused on righting the wrongs that had been done to her and eliminating bullying. That was an excellent start to fixing what he didn't like about royal life. The queen's influence within the palace was immense, as only the king could countermand her orders. So, if Rue was in that position, she would have a blank slate to change palace culture. The question was if he could keep her alive long enough to take the throne if he brought her back and immediately declared that she would be the crown princess. As they had learned, some of her enemies would stop at nothing to see her dead. How far do you think that she can make it if we just stay here? Can you push her far enough that she will be safe to stand beside me in public? Lucas asked. Carl shrugged. I don't know how long that will take. It's more about lowering the bar to her safety than growing her power. If the palace isn't cleaned up at least a little, it won't be safe to go back, even at totem rank. Now, I can push and force her through another advancement or two before my tricks will run dry. But after that, it will be all up to politics. Lucas watched the training in silence for a few more minutes, then nodded. It's not a terrible idea. I don't know if my father will go for it. He likely has a political match in mind for before I ascend. But it would work out very well for Rue and I if we did things that way. You're right, she wouldn't harm Mildred. She doesn't have it in her to harm her friends. For that reason alone, she would be a good choice, but I suspect that the reason you are here is not because she was struggling, but because of what will happen after she is not. Lucas realized. Carl smiled. Good guess. You are right, it's not about the fact that she is struggling. I was sent here to help her grow. But the how and why I was sent are confidential. Rest assured, when I say that she has the potential to be great, I mean it. But if everything goes wrong, that potential for greatness could be used to someone else's advantage. There are many other dragon clans within the Isles, and most of them would welcome a princess with her potential. Just a little nudge to get the crown prince to see things his way. Chapter 1403 Suspicious Intent. Crown Prince Lucas was immediately suspicious of Carl's intentions. It didn't take a genius to realize that he knew more than he was willing to share, so now that he was pushing for Rue to be made crown princess, his motives were definitely suspect. Could it be that Carl wanted her to take over his position? Or did he just think that Rue would make a good queen? The third possibility was the one that was truly disturbing, though. What if the Chaos Dragon had foreseen something that made it necessary for Rue to be queen? Could there be some catastrophe headed their way that would be averted with certain people in just the right role? Having the right person doing the job when things went wrong was the most foolproof method of saving citizens in a disaster. But the not knowing was killing him. I will need to think about the best options, both for the kingdom and for Rue. I get that political marriages are different, but I can't condemn her to a life like the queen has with my father, a loveless political union, if there is a better option. He relented after a moment. Carl shrugged. It's up to you. Do what you think needs to be done and I will go along with it. I'm sure you already know that I'm not allowed to tell you the future that has been foreseen, but don't let it stress you out too much. What needs to be will be. And I believe that we've already averted the very worst of it. Probably. Now that he thought of it, there was still an excellent chance that Rue could turn down the dark path if another attack like this was successful, and she lost one of the few friends that she had managed to gain. The loss of Mildred would have been devastating to her, and she would have never forgiven the queen for setting up the attack, even if whatever royal investigation they did was to produce evidence to implicate someone else. It didn't take a genius to gather that there was likely to be a cover-up to protect whoever had enough power to set that explosion. In short, Misty had set him up. There was no easy way to ensure that Rue was going to take the light path instead of the dark unless he did something drastic that would put her so far from danger, or so far above her peers, that it would become impossible for anyone to act against her. Before Lucas could answer, a strange training technique caught his attention. Kara was teaching Rue melee combat styles, but the current technique involved sliding forward on her knees and attacking with an uppercut. Only it was done with the hand open and claws extended. Is the badger teaching her too? Carl shrugged. Almost certainly, yes. Kara does not believe in off-limits attacks when it comes to self-defense. I seem to recall that you asked her about vital zones before. Lucas shook his head. That would have been the black dragon or Barry. But I get what you mean. Interestingly, that fighting style doesn't look ineffective. It's brutal and crude on the outside, but the more you look at it, the more obvious it becomes that it is designed to avoid common attack patterns and sneak inside to do maximum damage on a larger target. Kara would nearly always be fighting someone larger than she is, and Rue is also smaller than average for her age. She might actually have been one of the best possible options to teach the princess about close combat. Carl wouldn't go that far, but Kara's fighting style was effective, he would give it that much. The pair watched the training for a few more minutes, while Carl tried to determine what it would take to get him through this mission that Misty had sent him on, and then the butler came to relay a message. Highness, I have received word from the wall scouts that we have visitors coming up the mountain. They are not flying any heraldry on their carriage, but the beasts appear to be raptors from the palace. What rooms should we make ready? He asked. Prince Lucas frowned. They weren't expecting to see anyone at all. In fact, that was the entire point of them coming here in the first place. If they were just going to start receiving visitors from the palace, it would be impossible to ensure the princess's security. And then they would either have to push forward all their planning, or they would have to take more drastic measures like going into complete isolation. That would be a pain for the crown prince, as he still had duties to complete while he was here, and the necessary outside communication could reveal any hiding spot that they might choose. As they aren't showing any royal emblems, prepare the noble guest rooms for them. I was not expecting guests, so they may have arrived uninvited to the royal retreat. Treat them well, but their intentions may be suspect. Lucas explained. The royal family had protocols for this sort of thing, where someone pursuing one of the family members had no boundaries and was willing to pursue them anywhere to obtain whatever outcome it was that they were after. Most often it was a marriage alliance, but Lucas hadn't heard any recent rumors of them for himself or any ever for Rue. Though, given recent changes, that might not be the case much longer. I can keep them lost on the mountain if you would like, Carl suggested. How would you do that? Illusionary domain. They enter, drive in a straight line only to find themselves back at the start, facing the wrong way. Carl offered. Lucas laughed. We will save that for when we know that the guests will be an annoyance. These might just be curious, or they might be sent by someone who thought that they were being helpful. Like Barry or Dicarion, Carl assumed. Though who they would send, other than blue dragons, was a mystery to him. Chapter 1404 Dealing with Guests. Carl and Lucas went to the main entrance to wait for the guests, while Kara and Rue continued to train. The princess was now in dragon form, learning new combat styles from Kara, who had used greater beast form to enlarge herself to something resembling Rue's dragon size. The sight was enough to terrify the maids, though not out of fear for themselves. It was more concerning to think of what a dragon-sized badger could do to the castle and its contents. Even if she was only the size of a teen dragon, at least when she was small, the items that were bolted down seemed safe enough. The carriage pulled up in front of the gates, and a group of women in overly ornate dresses climbed down with excited smiles on their faces. Oh, this one is totally for you. They even sent you some variety. I smell black dragon and what might just be a divine fire dragon in that mix. Carl whispered. The girl with glowing golden eyes snapped her attention to Carl, startled that he could tell her species by scent. Even most dragons couldn't do that. They would just think that she was a red dragon cleric. Perhaps they are here for you. I hear that Sihosesa is quite open-minded about such things. You might not be royal, but you are an avatar of the world dragon and a friend of the Supreme Lady. Lucas teased. I'm not that cruel. My wife would kill them for even thinking about it in her presence. She's adorable when she's protective. The thought of a divine fox acting offended and protective was actually an adorable thought, Prince Lucas decided. Though he wouldn't want to risk his beloved's anger just to see it. So, if they were really consort candidates, it would be up to him to sort it all out. The girl that Carl had identified as a divine fire dragon cleared her throat. Your Highness, Lord Avatar, don't get the wrong idea. I am not a courtesan or a bedgirl. I was not sent here to entertain you in that fashion. She insisted. Well, that's a relief. But what were you sent here for? I am sure that you can see how a carriage full of lovely young dragons of marriageable age could be misconstrued as an attempt to woo the delicate sensibilities of our crown prince and steal his innocence. Carl asked. The girls covered their mouths to hide their laughter. Crown Prince Lucas was a new father. What innocence would they be stealing? I know what it looks like, and it was intentional. We are from the Royal Crafting Guilds, sent here to interrogate Lord Avatar Carl about the strange magical techniques that he has displayed since his arrival. Our elders have yet to properly identify the techniques used to build the new training room in the palace, and that was deemed unacceptable. Then, there is the matter of the rumored advancement potions that were given to Princess Rue to accelerate her growth, and the matter of you being able to teach skills that are not part of the skill tree without using a skill book. She explained. I'm a pretty good cook too. Don't forget that part. Carl agreed. The dragoness sighed. Is that attitude optional? Because I really don't have the patience to deal with being teased all day long. She's got you there. Lucas laughed. Fine. I will help you with your studies. And the cost won't even be too high. Carl agreed. The divine fire dragon laughed. Oh, now I am curious. What do you find to be a reasonable price to instruct others in lost and obscure crafting skills? Princess Rue needs loyal companions. In exchange for my teachings, I want you to swear loyalty to the princess, never to betray her trust. Carl announced. Everyone, even the butler and Prince Lucas, stared at Carl in shock. While the price sounded reasonable, it would normally be an oath given to the master craftsman not to betray their secrets, not loyalty to the princess, who was not even a student of his. At least not in that sense. If that is the price, we will agree. There is no real harm in swearing not to betray the princess, but such an oath won't override our oath to protect the nation. Should she one day be a threat to the kingdom as a whole, we will not aid her. The others nodded and Carl smiled. Wonderful. Come inside, please. We will get you all settled, and then we can start your training, and introduce Rue to her new best friends. Lucas sighed. Are you sure that you know what you're doing? They're all from top noble families, and not even all from Gathuzan. Carl smiled. Everyone needs loyal companions to make their life better. You have Nix, and while these ladies might not have all of his impeccable fashion sense, they're still going to be important to Rue's future. The ladies laughed at the mention of the incubus. He was generally considered an oddball, but his skills were undeniable. What crafting guilds sent you? I can help with inscription, rune crafting, alchemy, tailoring, and cooking, Carl explained. You weren't joking about being able to cook? One of the ladies asked. Not at all. I have access to the mystic cooking skill. The finest of magical food products for advanced constitutions and rapid growth require it. None of them had heard that before, but they did know of the skill. It was a requirement to work for the royal kitchens, as the king's closest family members were treated to it at most meals. Most of us came from the alchemists, but the others came from the obscure magic research department of the Dragon Church. The Divine Fire Dragon explained. Oh, I would have expected more blue dragons. Carl noted. How would we have passed them off as marriage candidates to sneak them out of the palace? If you send more than one blue dragon somewhere, they're definitely going to study something. It's not a believable cover. Chapter 1405 Flicker. 2 hours later, everyone was settled into their rooms, refreshed and fed for an afternoon of training. Flicker, the divine fire dragon, was quickly becoming Rue's new best friend, as Carl had promised. But it was impossible to tell whether it was against her will or not. As soon as she had come out of her room to find him, she had been grabbed and abducted by Kara, who wanted someone for Rue to spar with who was also a mage, and not too much physically larger than the princess. Of course, the dragon was mythic ranked, as divine fire dragons were normally born as overlords. But Kara didn't mind, and Rue was happy to adopt her with Kara's recommendation. Carl, meet my friend Flicker. She's going to stay here as an alchemist. Isn't that awesome? You know alchemy, right? Will you be teaching her too? Rue asked. Of course. She's already got alchemy as a trade skill, so I will help her upgrade it and teach her some new recipes, so she can make even better potions to help everyone grow. Then, when you catch up to her level, you can both work on becoming immortals together. Carl agreed. The divine fire dragon stared at Carl in shock. She didn't expect that he would have such high expectations for the princess. But she had been away from the palace for a while, and she hadn't had time to get all caught up on the gossip before coming here, where she found the infamous useless princess to actually be incredibly skilled, and almost ready to advance again. But Flicker's species innately understood the fundamental rule of fire, so she was guaranteed to advance to immortality as she grew. The question was only if Rue had the comprehension abilities to allow her to keep up. Perhaps we can continue this sparring session after I have had some time to work with Lord Carl on my skills? Flicker asked. Kara shrugged. I don't have a problem with that. There are more dragons here to play with, and Rue needs to learn how to spar with all of them, not just our combat bunnies. Flicker's eyes sparkled with excitement as she was relieved from her duties, then turned serious as she faced Carl, who had promised her new skills. For a species that was bound to become immortal, rare skills were everything. If nothing went wrong, they had forever to practice them, so the chance to learn something rare or forgotten by most of society would give them an edge when they did reach immortality and had to move to the immortal realm to continue their growth. I was no secret to the divine fire dragons that while their potential was immense, they were still looked down on by many species for being born mortal. So, to distinguish themselves, they needed something that would put them above the hatchlings of species born in the immortal realm, where they were innately immortal ranked from birth. So, how does this teaching process work? Flicker asked as Carl walked toward her. It's simple, really. I will ask the World Dragon to help us out. Pat your head, and you will get a system notice. Kara laughed quietly to herself as she realized that despite his promise, Carl fully intended to tease the young dragon. She might be mythic ranked, but she was far from being an adult even if she was older than Rue. She reminded Kara of Lotus, doomed to be the shortest adult in the room. She didn't share the same carefree personality, though. Half of that makes sense, the other half is highly questionable. She replied, "Just trust the process. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, runic alchemy. Will be transferred to the diminutive dragoness Flicker." Flicker frowned as she read the system message. It definitely just made a short joke at her expense. And the world dragon avatar was patting her head like a child. But she got the skill. She actually improved her alchemy to a whole new tier of capability with a single touch. She could feel the knowledge of a whole new language flowing into her mind, along with the basics of a new crafting skill that was based on her own alchemy. "Are you sure it's wise to give those skills out here?" Kara asked. "It's fine. She's a divine fire dragon, and she doesn't live in the Dragon Isles in our time. She almost certainly left when she reached immortality, so it's not going to mess anything serious up in our own timeline. The skills were known in this resurgence, they were just really rare." Carl replied. Flicker was simply standing in the middle of the room, too lost in the new knowledge to do anything. So Kara went looking for a new volunteer to help them train Rue. They were all still in fancy dresses, playing their parts in case someone was watching and reporting their actions. But they could certainly hold a magical duel with the princess. It wasn't about power, it was about picking the right skills at the right time. Both of which were areas that Rue lacked in. She didn't have many skills, as she had just received her class, and her timing was far from perfect, so she ended up burning much more mana than necessary. But she was getting used to the bunnies and their rhythm. So Kara was determined to shake her up and remind the princess that she still had a long way to go before she could call herself a proficient mage. "Why don't I collect a few more of the alchemists right now, and we can start on the advanced alchemy training while Kara and Rue work with the others. That should give us a nice balance between physical and practical training time, without leaving anyone out of the fun." Carl suggested. "Well, we have 4 alchemists and 3 researchers, so it's a fairly even split. Assuming that you can handle that many students at a time." Flicker suggested. "That's perfect. Kara, those 3 are yours for now. I will return these ones for training in the morning." Chapter 1406 Alchemists for Rue. Carl brought the 4 alchemists to the other side of the illusionary domain, and then adjusted the spell to create a proper alchemy lab for them to work in, with clear walls so those not actively working could watch from a safe location. "First off, I will give everyone the basic skills that they will need to know to actually follow this course. You do all have alchemy as a basic trade skill, right? Not a specialty version of alchemy, or some alchemy-related equivalent. I'm not sure how any of those will function with this attempt to upgrade." Carl asked. The dragons chuckled at his question. "Is it so easy to get upgraded versions of trade skills? Just getting to the upper levels of alchemy is already a lifetime of work for most people. Asking them to max it out and start on an upgraded version is a bit much, especially at our age." Carl shrugged. "Fortunately, this doesn't require that you have maxed out your alchemy, only that it is of reasonable quality, and that you have the intelligence and class to go with it. Shamans are best, mages work well, but nature clerics and other plant-loving classes are also acceptable. Honestly, nature clerics are best sent to the cooking skill. It's more like home to them." The dragons nodded in understanding and Flicker rolled her eyes. "Well, we didn't think to bring a green dragon with us. Asking them to do anything is usually a last resort if the task will take more than 1 day. 1 whole day is being optimistic." Carl agreed. Then he reached out and placed his hand on the 2 closest dragons to activate. "Follow me, little one." The last one was left in confusion as the girls gasped and Flicker laughed. Then Carl finished the process by ruffling her curly black hair. "Oh, so it's like that. Physical contact is a condition of the spell. I have a few skills that are the same physical contact range only. It makes sense if you're trying to create a skill that avoids the possibility of targeting errors. I wonder if the skill was originally something that a spellcrafter made before it was included in a skill tree. Or is it part of your skill tree at all?" she asked. "It is part of my skill tree. It's a peculiarity of the beast master chain of classes. They are highly attuned to magical beasts, so affection and bonding are a theme through many of the skills." Carl explained. "And what is this one called, according to the system?" she asked. "Are you sure you want to know?" All 4 dragons nodded their heads in unison. "It's called, Follow Me, Little One. The notifications that you got are personalized by the system, though. I don't choose them, or get to see what it calls you." Carl replied. "That makes sense. There is no way that you would know how much I love chocolate chips." The curly-haired girl laughed. "I will put that on the list if we have anyone in the research group that is interested in cooking. But I am certain that someone in the kitchen here can accommodate a chocolate-obsessed sweet tooth. I know that it must be severe if the system saw fit to mention it." The dragon laughed, and then took out a giant bag of chocolate from her inventory. "Don't worry. I came prepared, just in case they didn't have the good stuff. Well then, crisis averted. Now, we should start on the basics of your new skill. Adding runes to a potion is both incredibly difficult and incredibly simple at the same time. Most of the difficulty is in getting the syntax right and combining the runes so there are no unintended side effects. So, let's start with a simple healing potion, and then add runes to increase effectiveness and the duration of the healing effect. Done properly, it will cause the healing effect to more than triple, with the healing spread over a whole minute. So, if you're in combat, there is much less waste and you can drink a potion while taking damage to offset expected incoming injuries. I will write it on the board. While Carl worked on the alchemy upgrades, Rue and Kara were having much more fun with the other 3 members. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to play tag. But with staves. The goal is to capture the flag off the back of the belt of your opponents, but everyone gets a staff to defend themselves. You're all caster type classes, so it should be perfect, right? Kara asked. The Black Dragon sighed. I am not a caster class. I am a ranger. Kara shrugged. Well, you're not a warrior. That is true. But not the point. Are you good with fighting sticks? No. Then you're a caster class today. Now everyone, take your defensive sticks and get to work. It's all about the footwork when you're fighting something like a rogue who is trying to get behind you to stab you in the back. Kara announced. Even the ranger couldn't argue the logic behind that one. The sneakiness of rogues, and the inability of most combatants to deal with their agility-type combat, led to them being one of the most effective classes in confined spaces or city environments. Within castles, the rogue class was such a common source of assassination attempts, that even the assassin class often got called rogues. Today, with 4 combatants who had never used their staves as a defensive weapon before, the game of tag became much more of a childish sport than a serious bit of combat training. However, in Kara's mind, that was perfect. They would remember what worked here today, and use it to avoid people sneaking up on them in the future. That's why the flags were in the middle of the back of their belt. Prince Lucas watched the whole scene unfold, while trying not to laugh. Kara wasn't even trying to take the flags. She just liked slapping people on the backside to make them jump. Chapter 1407 Incoming Dragons. Carl and Prince Lucas were just about to grab a drink between training sessions when a wall guard ran in, panting with exertion. Highness, we have incoming dragons. 20 royal guard on their wings, flying fully armored in battle formation. He gasped. Prince Lucas visibly paled, so Carl patted him on the shoulder. Relax, breathe. If they're here for a fight, we will give them a fight. But I suspect that they're here for something else. If it was really about fighting us, there would be a red and a black dragon with them. He explained. The crown prince frowned. How does that logic even work? From behind them, Kara laughed. Because if someone seriously tried to kill someone under Carl's protection, the fallout of the battle would draw the attention of the war and death gods. The amount of damage that would occur in a battle between 10 royal guards and an avatar of the world dragon would level half the mountain range. Carl shrugged. She wasn't wrong. Lucas let out a slow breath. You're certain that, if those are the Queen's guard, we're not going to lose the battle? Carl nodded. One-on-one, they would have a hard time even defeating the Elven Kings. They're a mythic dungeon boss and I'm a harder target than they are. Plus, I could summon an entire force of soldiers, or set an illusionary domain with all the combat bunnies buffed by War Beast. There is a reason that I'm here to help Rue grow. We're not in any real danger. But Carl still went outside to meet the incoming wing of dragons, and transformed into avatar form before buffing himself with War Beast, upcast to immortal rank using the amulet. The golden armor on his body was glorious, and even Kara had to stop to do a double take. It was so shiny. She wanted it. Lucas came out behind them, and transformed into his natural dragon form, while Kara chased everyone back inside to protect Rue. They were mostly mythic dragons, and while they were not combat specialists, it was more important that they build that bond of trust with Rue than that they put up a strong front today. Lucas flew up to meet the incoming dragons with Carl right behind him, and the flight slowed, shifting into a defensive position at the sight of the massive world dragon. Compared to a fully buffed Carl, even a mythic shadow dragon looked like a half-grown whelp. Lord Lucas, we bring news. The king has ascended. By the divine laws of Gthuzan, you are required to report to Nar Palace within 24 hours. The leader of the flight announced. Carl wasn't sure if they meant that as the king was dead, or the king reached the immortal rank. Either one would call for the crown prince to be called back. But there was an underlying political layer here that Carl wasn't following. They had referenced a law that was most likely succession, as they were here for the crown prince. But Carl didn't know what the protocol was going to be. I will gather my entourage and accompany you now. Avatar Carl, please call for the others to transform and follow us back. Lucas replied. Carl nodded, then flew down into the courtyard, where Kara had already gathered everyone by the doors. They all transformed, including Rue, whose new shadow dragon form was much smaller than anyone else. Here, Drink this before the flight. Kara informed her, holding out a potion. Rue downed the potion, trusting Kara's judgment. Then, her dragon form began to expand as she advanced, breaking through the bottleneck with the help of Remy's specialty potion. That's better. Still a bit small and cute, but you'll have an easier time keeping up. Or you can rest on Carl's back. Kara explained, then transformed into badger shape, so Rue couldn't ask her any questions. The royal guards looked shocked to see Rue advance again. She was quickly reaching what anyone would call a respectable power level for a juvenile princess, but she had advanced so fast after awakening that it was nearly incomprehensible. All that they could think was that all her potential had been bottled up, and now it was exploding out. But they didn't ask any questions as they led the procession back toward Nar Palace. That wasn't their job, they were just here to escort the crown prince and name successor back to the palace for the formal ceremonies. Protocol said that they didn't answer any questions at all, not even from Crown Prince Lucas, until they were back at the palace. However, they couldn't help but think that the whole formation looked more like an escort for the World Dragon avatar. He was so much larger than a normal dragon that he dominated the middle of the formation, and halfway through, he had collected Princess Rue, letting her adolescent dragon rest on his back as he casually soared among the others. "What's up with your aura? If I didn't know better, I would say that you were an immortal," Lucas asked as they approached the city. "It's the transformation spell. I wasn't sure if we were fighting, so I cast it at full power. Don't worry about it. I will feel normal once I transform back," Carl explained. Lucas shook his head, and then tilted his chin toward the swarm of black bodies above the city. "That won't be for some time. Every royal and noble will be in dragon form until the formal proclamation is made. Father was near the bottleneck when we left. So, I suspect that they mean he reached immortal rank and not that he was killed. Immortals can't be king here. It's against our rules as it prevents succession. If he did advance, they will crown me today, and that is going to cause a whole set of outcomes that will come fast. If he somehow died, we will mourn today, and I will seize the crown tomorrow in a challenge. That will be a whole other issue, but we can talk about it later." Chapter 14082 advanced. As they approached the city, the dragons in the air began to chant something that became more distinct by the kilometer, turning into a roar of draconic voices. "The immortal king has ascended. A new king is chosen. Long live the king." Lucas smiled, and then gestured for Mildred and Rue to come forward to join him. Carl fell back 100 meters, keeping himself behind the royal guards. But he also gained altitude, so he had a better view. "The looks they're giving us say that we were supposed to be lower, and looking up," Kara noted. "Damn, I should have read a book on this or something." Carl sighed. Then, 3 more dragons flew up to join him. Decarion, representing the black dragon. A female red dragon who might be the orphanage matron or the red avatar, and librarian Barry. "Avatar, your timing is impeccable as expected," Decarion's voice whispered in Carl's mind. Carl winked at him, and the black dragon smirked back. The look made every dragon looking in their direction nervous. The representatives of the Death God and the System Lord conspiring on any topic was bad news for everyone else involved. Lucas reached a spot he was happy with, and the 2 women hovered on either side of him as he prepared to speak. "I am humbled by your expressions of loyalty and admiration. Today we celebrate the reign of my father, and the start of his immortal journey. Those who have served him loyally will be granted legacy positions under my rule, and those who have slighted him will be given the chance at a fresh start. That is my mercy as king. As tradition demands, if anyone should wish to challenge for the throne, or for the position of queen, they may challenge our designated champion. Carl, Avatar of the World Dragon, will be available for the next 7 days to receive challenges." Kara mentally laughed as Lucas nominated Carl to fight challenges on behalf of both himself and Rue. But she didn't think that anyone was actually going to do it. Everyone liked the crown prince, and knew that he was going to be good for the nation. Plus, Carl was enormous. If it came down to a fight in dragon form, he would mangle them. On second thought, she hoped that someone would. But the news was slowly sinking into the crowd that Lucas had just declared his choice for queen. He hadn't spoken the name, but there were 2 female dragons flying next to him. One was his consort Mildred, and the other was Princess Rue, flying at his right wing, where the queen would normally hold the place of honor if there was no crown prince. "Where is the little one?" Carl asked, just realizing that he couldn't see the hatchling. "I've got her. She's in a sling, cuddled against my fur," Kara replied. Well, there was no warmer spot for her to be when they were flying through the mountains. Mildred must have known that and not put up a fight. The realization that Lucas was silently nominating Rue as queen outraged many of the women who wanted the position. But none more than the current queen. With her husband reaching immortal rank, she could either accompany him into the immortal realm, or she could remain here as queen dowager. One would have her looked down as a mortal in the immortal realm, but the other would see her power fading under the ascendancy of a new queen. Both were entirely unacceptable options in her opinion. However, she couldn't challenge Carl for the position. That was just suicide with extra steps. She would have to wait for the formal challenges to end, then put a plan in motion to discredit and get rid of Rue so that she could keep her position. She had produced many successors for the king. There was no reason that she was unable to do it again. All she had to do was get Lucas to go along with her plan. Then a voice rose from the crowd. The great seer of Unzatherb says that your choice for champion is invalid. The champion must be a member of the Gathuzan royal staff. That was one of the queen's personal maids, but Lucas was in no mood for her nonsense. However, Rue beat him to the answer. Lord Carl, avatar of the world dragon, is my tutor. Royal tutors are members of the royal staff, even when they are not citizens of Gathuzan. He is eligible. If you should want to challenge for the right to become queen, you will have to produce a champion who can defeat him. Everyone turned to Carl, who nodded. Indeed, I have been given the role of royal tutor, among others. I have held that role since the day that I arrived here. There were a few in the crowd who could tell when a lie was told, and Carl's answer was clear and unambiguous enough that there were no more questions about his right to be the champion. However, the queen was not impressed. She had become increasingly certain that this man was not from their world. There was something off about him, and his arrival was suspicious no matter what angle you looked at it from. Especially now that the king had reached immortality. 1 month later, and Rue would still be a useless child with no chance at the throne. 1 month earlier, and one of the schemes to end her should have succeeded. The Supreme Lady was interfering with things that should not be meddled with, putting her snout where it did not belong. The queen wasn't the only one who thought that way, and for a moment, Matilda turned her attention to the mass of people thinking about her and cursing her in their minds. A world dragon and a chaos badger causing trouble, while everyone blamed her. Interesting, but not her problem. As the saying went, they were not her monkeys and that was not her circus. Let someone else deal with the mess they caused. Chapter 1409 Champion for the Throne. After a few seconds of silence, a dragon flew up out of the crowd. I challenge for the throne. A first-born son of a mistress has no right of ascension, no matter what our immortal father wanted. The dragon insisted. Lucas nodded. Then, by all means, begin. The champions will decide the outcome, as per divine law. The dragon snorted disdainfully. The king was not allowed to fight his own fights during the challenge, a test of his judgment, as the king was expected to be the strongest of the shadow dragons, and challenging him directly to a duel was unlikely to succeed. It was intended to be a measure to keep a powerful fool off the throne, as there was a real chance that the chosen champion could betray him if he was not a good leader. The younger prince activated a magical item, and his power sword, easily double what it was before, and far stronger than what Lucas could claim without outside assistance. Avatar, concede defeat, and there is no need for you to be injured here, the challenger demanded. Carl smiled and extended one clawed finger in the man's direction. Nullify shattered not only the barriers, but also the strengthening buff on the dragon. Kara laughed wildly, rolling on her back in the air and clutching her belly, which had the hatchling princess strapped to it. The change of angle let the little dragon get a better view of the shocked look on the man's face as Carl charged at him. He didn't even have time to recover from his shock before a massive clawed paw hit him on the back, tearing the muscles in the base of his wings, and sending him crashing to the ground with a fleshy crunch. That should settle it. Unless he's planning to get back up, Carl announced. He was a mythic rank dragon, he would heal the physical injuries in a few minutes, if not faster. But the damage to his pride would last far longer. Being swatted out of the air with a casual claw, not even a skill, was utterly humiliating. It wasn't something that should be able to happen to him, but his impact-rattled mind still couldn't comprehend why his protective spells had failed. The assembly of nobles and royals fell silent at the scene. Even if they had some intention of challenging, what were they supposed to do about that world dragon? The only one of them who might even stand a chance was Dicarion, and he was already flying in the back, openly supporting the king. But was a world dragon even vulnerable to the breath attack of a black dragon? The world dragons breathed life. A hard counter to the black dragon's cloud of death could very well end the same way as this challenge, with Carl relying on a massive physical advantage to simply knock his opponent out of the sky. If there are no more challengers, we will begin the celebration feast, Lucas declared. The dragons began to roar, their voices shaking the air. Long live the king! In one wave, the dragons retreated to the city, leaving only Carl and the avatars plus Barry, still in the sky over the city. Well, that was fun. We should do this more often. For a second there, I could feel the goddess' attention on us. Just long enough for you to smack that moron out of the sky. I swear that almost triggered a civil war. But nobody was brave enough to follow his lead after he lost. The Queen's faction is going to collapse with a whimper, I fear. Hardly worthy of the attention of the Red Dragon. The war priestess complained. I did consider making it look like a fair fight, but that might have just caused even greater chaos. Carl joked. Dicarion laughed, a rumbling noise that somehow echoed, despite there being nothing for it to echo off. I would put money on the fact that it would. The Black Dragon also saw great potential in this situation, but his attention has faded. The Black Dragon avatar agreed. I'm just here for a better viewpoint, Barry added. Somehow, that was the most blue dragon thing that Carl had ever heard. He didn't care how it turned out, as long as he had the best view so that he didn't miss any details for the official record. Should we join them inside? Carl asked. Dicarion shook his head. No, let them all play at their royal family politics. The new king will take care of Princess Rue for the next hour, and we will join them at dinner, along with the nobles who are not directly part of the royal family. We could go wait inside if you like. The nobles are sure to want to congratulate you on your victory, and perhaps suck up to you in case you're joining the king's faction on a longer-term basis. Carl nodded, and the Black Dragon led them all to the large balcony where Carl had landed for his first dinner here at the palace. The situation was similar this time, only there were tens of thousands of awestruck commoners staring up at them from the city as they landed, and the room was even more packed than before, as everyone who could possibly get an invitation had crowded in with at least one additional guest. Avatars, it's a pleasure to see you all gathered here today. Is there any news on the succession? Has the king perhaps let slip any details about his new advisory council? One of the men asked the moment that Carl led the group inside in humanoid form. Dicarion shook his head. The new king was only just advised that the immortal king had advanced. There was no time for discussions before the coronation began. A number of the nobles backed away at that news. If there was no decision, then there was still a chance for them to make the best impression. The question was, who were they supposed to be impressing? Nyx was not here, he was with the royal family. The king only had one consort, who was with him, and none of the guests in this room were close enough with him that they were likely to sway his decisions. No, there was one here who might change his mind. The Chaos Badger was clearly holding his child, and the hatchling was happily laughing as Kara narrated whatever it was that she was doing. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.